Meanwhile, in King's Landing, someone has to tend the fermenting barrels in the ancient brewery district, even when tax collectors prowl the streets and whispers of dragons returning fill the taverns. Welcome, friend. You've wandered into another quiet corner of worlds made of legend. Tonight we're stepping into the brew house of the Red Keep district, where crafting ale for the Seven Kingdoms becomes a meditation, and where the most legendary city in Westeros reveals itself through the most ordinary of crafts. Here, among the copper kettles and oak barrels, you'll discover that even in a city where kings rule and intrigue never sleeps, someone still needs to mash grain and count coppers, no matter what rumours swirl through the cobbled streets. So before you settle in for this shift with me, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, so we can keep bringing you more tales from the ordinary side of extraordinary places. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight. It's always good to know who's keeping me company during these quiet watches. Now get comfortable, let the quiet hush of the room surround you, and allow the small steady moments of King's Landing's brewing season to guide you gently toward rest. You push through the heavy oak door of the King's Barrel Brewery, and the familiar scent of molten yeast wraps around you, like a well-worn cloak. It's not quite bread, not quite wine, but something in between that only exists in the particular atmosphere of a working brew house. The transition from King's Landing's cool morning air to the brewery's warm, humid interior always makes you take a deeper breath, the way you might when coming home after a long journey. The brew house occupies a converted warehouse that's been standing since before the Targaryen conquest, with original timber beams overhead and stone walls that have absorbed 300 years of brewing. The wooden floorboards creak under your feet with a sound that's become as familiar as your own heartbeat, each board announcing your arrival in its own particular voice. The morning brewer, old Tim, a weathered man who's been working mornings for 40 years, looks up from his logbook with a tired smile. "Morning, John," he says, his voice carrying that particular weariness that comes from managing fires and kettles for 8 hours straight. Quiet shift mostly, though there's been some commotion about dragons being spotted near Dragonstone. Town crier's been at it since dawn. Got everyone stirred up. He slides the brewing log across the worn wooden counter, and the pages make a soft rustling sound against the old oak surface. The log is leather-bound, its pages yellowed with age, and spotted with old stains from countless brewing sessions. Each entry documents temperatures, grain quantities, brewing times, and notes about fermentation progress. You've learned not to question the traditions of King's Landing brewing, where such careful records might mean the difference between a good batch and a ruined one that loses the brewery precious coin. You make your way through the brewhouse's main floor, past the massive copper kettles that dominate the space, like sleeping giants. The morning fire is still burning low beneath the main kettle, and you can feel its warmth radiating across the stone floor. The break room sits off to one side, little more than an alcove with a bench and a small table, but it's yours for the taking during quiet moments. Your brewing apron hangs on its hook near the grain stores, the same one you've worn for 5 years now. It's made of heavy canvas that's been treated with oil and wax to resist water and heat, stained with the evidence of countless brewing sessions. The brewery's mark is sewn onto the breast, a barrel with 3 crowns above it, representing service to the crown, going back generations. You slip it on, tying the strings behind your back, and immediately feel yourself shifting into work mode. The time marker sits near the brewing log, a simple hourglass that you turn to note your arrival. The sand begins its steady fall, marking 5:47 a.m. The brewing day officially starts at 6, but arriving early gives you time to check the fires properly, to make sure everything is in order before the day's work begins in earnest. In King's Landing, where a batch of ale might serve everyone from dock workers to minor nobles, quality matters more than speed. Old Tim hands you the notes for the day, written in his careful script. 5:47 a.m, Brewer John checked in. Fires status good. Fermentation barrels, all progressing normally. Notes: main kettle needs cleaning before next batch. 3 barrels ready for tapping tomorrow. The main brewing floor is through another door, and stepping through it is like entering a cathedral dedicated to the craft of brewing. 6 massive copper kettles sit in a row, each one large enough to brew 100 gallons at a time. The kettles are ancient, their copper surfaces burnished to a warm glow from generations of use and cleaning. Some bear dents and patches from centuries of service, but they're still the finest brewing vessels in this quarter of the city. The smell here is pure brewery, the sweet scent of malted barley, the sharp tang of fermenting beer, the warm aroma of boiling wort, and underneath it all, the faint ghost of countless batches that have been brewed in this space over the generations. It's a smell that gets into your clothes, your hair, your very skin, until you carry it with you wherever you go. The main kettle sits in the centre position, looking patient and ready for the day's work. It's the largest of the 6, capable of brewing enough ale to fill 30 barrels when working at full capacity. Someone, probably old Tim during his shift, has already wiped down the exterior, leaving the copper gleaming even in the dim morning light from the high windows. You walk around the kettle slowly, performing the morning inspection that's become as natural as breathing. First you check the fire beneath. The coals are glowing red-orange, the heat steady and even. You add 3 pieces of split oak from the wood pile, positioning them carefully to maintain the temperature without creating too much flame. The wood catches quickly, the flames licking up around the edges of the kettle's bottom. Next, you check the water level in the kettle by tapping the side at various heights, listening for the change in tone that indicates where the water line sits. The sound is hollow higher up, then becomes fuller and deeper as you tap lower, finally becoming completely dull when you reach below the water level. The kettle holds about 60 gallons currently, enough for a good brewing session, though you'll need to add more as the day progresses. The grain stores sit along the eastern wall, large wooden bins filled with different types of malted barley. The main bin holds pale malt, the foundation of most ales you brew here. The smaller bins contain specialty malts, crystal malt for colour and sweetness, roasted barley for darker brews, wheat malt for summer ales. Each bin has a wooden scoop and a label written in careful letters, though you know them all by smell and texture, as much as by reading. You reach into the pale malt bin, letting the grain run through your fingers. The kernels are dry and slightly sweet-smelling, perfectly malted and ready for brewing. You crush a few grains between your teeth, an old brewer's test, and taste the sweet, biscuity flavour that indicates good quality malt. The grain will make good ale. The yeast room is kept separate, a small cool chamber where the brewery's precious yeast cultures are maintained. You check the door to make sure it's properly sealed. Yeast is valuable, worth more than silver in some quarters, and keeping it healthy is essential to the brewery's operation. Through the thick wooden door, you can smell the sharp, fruity aroma of active yeast doing its work in the starter batches. The fermentation cellar is down a short flight of stone steps, carved into the bedrock beneath the building. The temperature here is naturally cool and constant, perfect for the slow fermentation that makes good ale. 30 oak barrels sit in neat rows, each one containing beer at different stages of fermentation. Some barrels are freshly filled, their contents still actively bubbling, as yeast converts sugar to alcohol. Others are older, their fermentation complete, just waiting for the right time to be tapped and served. You walk along the rows, checking each barrel methodically. First, you look at the bungs, the wooden plugs that seal each barrel. They should be firmly seated, with just a slight gap to allow fermentation gases to escape. A loose bung means possible contamination, while a completely sealed bung means dangerous pressure build-up. Each bung is exactly as it should be. Next, you listen to each barrel, placing your ear against the wood. Active fermentation makes a gentle fizzing sound, like distant rain or a creak over stones. The freshest barrels hiss and bubble actively. The older ones are silent, their work complete. You make notes in the fermentation log, marking which barrels are ready for tapping, which need more time, which might benefit from a taste test later in the day. The newest barrels, 3 of them filled just yesterday during Old Tim's shift, are fermenting vigorously. You can smell the yeasty, almost fruity aroma they're releasing, and tiny bubbles of foam appear around the edges of their bungs. These will need another week at minimum, possibly 2 before they're ready to tap. Patience is essential in brewing. Rushing a fermentation makes thin, sour beer that no one wants to drink. You make your way back upstairs, satisfied that the cellar is in good order. The morning light is growing stronger now, streaming through the high windows and illuminating the dust motes that dance in the air. The brewery is coming fully awake, the fire's warming, the kettle's ready, another day of work prepared to unfold in its steady, familiar rhythm. Old Tim is finishing his notes, preparing to head home after his night shift. Everything's ready for you, John. Fresh water in the well, firewood stacked, grain bins are full. We're low on hops though. You'll need to visit the market later and buy more from Mara. She had fresh ones yesterday. Probably still has some. Thanks, Tim. Rest well, you've earned it. You take the brewing log from him, noting his final entries about temperatures and timing. Aye, and you mind those tax collectors. Saw 2 of them prowling around Guild Street yesterday, checking shop ledgers. They'll be here eventually, mark my words. Keep the counting straight. Old Tim pulls on his coat, preparing to face the morning streets. You nod, though the mention of tax collectors creates a small knot of tension in your stomach. The King's taxmen have been more aggressive lately, checking records and counting stock with the kind of thoroughness that suggests someone high up wants more revenue. You've already moved 3 barrels of your best ale to the hidden cellar behind the coal stores, just in case. Not cheating exactly, just protecting your margin. Every brewer in King's Landing does it. Old Tim leaves and suddenly you're alone in the brewery, master of the copper kettles and oak barrels for the next 8 hours. The responsibility settles over you like a familiar weight, satisfying rather than burdensome. This is your domain, your craft, your contribution to the life of the city. The first task of any brewing day is to prepare the mash. You begin by calculating quantities. For a standard batch of ale, you'll need 30 pounds of grain and 15 gallons of water. The grain must be crushed to expose the starches, then mixed with hot water to convert those starches to fermentable sugars. It's simple chemistry that brewers have practiced for thousands of years, but it still requires attention to detail and proper timing. You fill a large wooden bucket with pale malt, scooping grain from the bin until you judge the weight is right. Then you carry the bucket to the grain mill, a hand-cranked device with 2 iron rollers set just close enough to crack each grain without pulverizing it to flour. The mill is one of the brewery's most important tools, kept oiled and properly adjusted, its rollers set to the perfect gap. Cranking the mill is rhythmic, almost meditative work. You pour grain into the hopper, turn the crank, and watch crushed grain fall into the collection box below. The mill makes a steady crunching sound, and the motion becomes automatic. Pour, crank, watch, repeat. Your arms know the resistance of the crank, the proper speed to maintain, the rhythm that processes grain efficiently without jamming the rollers. The crushed grain, now called grist, has a wonderful smell, sweet and fresh and full of promise. You carry the collection box to the main kettle and set it aside, then turn your attention to the water. The brewery draws water from a deep well, considered some of the cleanest in King's Landing. You work the pump handle, feeling it resist at first, then loosen as water begins to flow. The pump makes a rhythmic squeaking sound, and cold, clear water pours from the spout into your wooden buckets. You heat some of the water in a smaller copper kettle over a side fire, bringing it to the proper temperature for mashing. About 150 degrees, hot enough to convert starches, but not so hot that it kills the enzymes that do the work. Testing temperature without a thermometer is a skill learned over years. You dip your finger in briefly, feeling the heat. Too hot to hold your finger in for more than a second, but not hot enough to scald immediately. That's close enough. When the water is ready, you pour it into the main kettle, then begin adding the crushed grain slowly, stirring constantly with a long wooden paddle. The grain and water combine into a thick porridge called mash, and it's crucial to stir thoroughly to prevent clumps and ensure even temperature. The paddle is heavy, the stirring requires strength, and you can feel your shoulders and arms beginning to work properly for the first time this morning. The mash smells wonderful, sweet and grainy and wholesome, like breakfast porridge, but richer, more complex. You continue stirring for several minutes, then let the mash rest, covering the kettle with a wooden lid to maintain temperature. For the next hour, the enzymes in the grain will work their magic, converting starches to sugars that yeast will eventually convert to alcohol. All you need to do is wait and maintain proper temperature. This waiting time is when you can attend to other tasks. You check the fires beneath all the kettles, making sure they're burning steadily. You sweep the floor around the brewing area, collecting spilled grain and chaff. You organise tools on their proper hooks, paddles, ladles, buckets, scoops, everything in its place. A well-organised brewery is a safe brewery, and a safe brewery is a profitable one. Through the high windows, you can hear King's Landing beginning its day. The sound of cartwheels on cobblestones, the calls of street vendors setting up their stalls, the distant shout of the town crier announcing something you can't quite make out. The city is waking up, and you're part of that awakening, doing your small part to keep the city fed and watered, or in your case, aled. The brewing day has truly begun, and you settle into the familiar rhythm of the work, satisfied with the morning's progress. After an hour, you check the mash by drawing off a small sample. The liquid runs clear and sweet, which means the conversion is complete. Now comes the lautering, separating the sweet liquid, called wort, from the spent grain. You open the valve at the bottom of the kettle, and golden wort begins to flow into a collection vessel below. The first runnings are cloudy with grain particles, so you pour them back into the top of the mash, recirculating until the wort runs clear. Then you direct the flow into the clean copper kettle positioned beside the main one. The wort streams out in a steady flow, clear and golden brown, smelling sweet and promising. This is the heart of brewing, this sweet liquid that will become beer. While the wort drains, you prepare for the boil. The fires beneath the second kettle need to be built up, strong and hot enough to bring 30 gallons of liquid to a rolling boil. You load more wood, oak and beech split into even pieces, arranging them to allow good airflow. The flames grow, licking up around the kettle's copper bottom, and you can feel the heat radiating outward in waves. The spent grain left in the first kettle is still valuable. You'll sell it to farmers who feed it to pigs and cattle. You shovel the hot, wet grain into burlap sacks, working quickly before it cools too much. The grain is heavy, steaming slightly, and the work is hot and sweaty, even in the cool morning air. Each sack weighs perhaps 30 pounds when full, and you stack them by the loading door for collection later. The King's Barrel Brewery sits on Guild Street, in the neighbourhood known locally as the Brewery District, though it's never called that officially. This quarter of King's Landing is squeezed between the Street of Steel to the north and the fish markets along the waterfront to the south. The buildings here are old, most dating back 200 or 300 years, built from stone and timber that has weathered countless storms and several fires. Guild Street itself is narrow and winding, following the natural contours of the hillside rather than any planned grid. The street is cobbled with rounded stones that become slippery when wet, and a central gutter runs down the middle to carry away rain and other refuse. On a busy day, the street is packed with carts, delivering grain and barrels, workers heading to and from the various breweries and alehouses, and merchants conducting business between establishments. The brewery district has perhaps 15 working breweries of various sizes, from operations like yours that employ 3 or 4 people, to larger establishments closer to the waterfront that brew enough ale to supply entire ships for long voyages. Each brewery has its own character, its own recipes, its own regular customers. There's competition, certainly, but also cooperation. Brewers will lend each other ingredients in emergencies, share information about grain quality, warn each other about bad hops or unscrupulous merchants. Your nearest neighbour is the Dragon's Head Brewery, run by old Septon Willem, who brews a dark, strong ale that's popular with the City Watch. His brewery sits directly across Guild Street. Its sign, a carved wooden dragon's head, painted red and black, hanging above the door. You've known Willem for 10 years, ever since you started working here, as an apprentice brewer, and you trust him more than most people in King's Landing. Down the street toward the waterfront is the Three Barrels, a much larger operation that primarily supplies taverns in the better parts of the city. They brew a lighter, more refined ale that's popular with merchants and minor nobility. You've never particularly liked their beer, too clean, too bland, lacking the character that makes good ale interesting, but they do good business and employ perhaps 20 people. In the other direction, up the hill, toward the Street of Steel, sits the Hammer and Anvil, a small brewery that specialises in very strong ales and even makes some mead during autumn when honey is plentiful. The brewer there, a woman named Jenna, is brilliant but erratic, prone to experimental batches that either turn out exceptional or completely undrinkable. You've shared recipes with her before, trading knowledge in the way that craftspeople do. The buildings along Guild Street are mostly 3 stories, ground floor for brewing or business, upper floors for living quarters. Your own brewery has living space above where you rent a small room, convenient for the early morning shifts and late night brewing emergencies. The rooms are simple but adequate, with a decent fireplace and windows that overlook the street below. The street itself has a particular character that changes throughout the day. Early morning, like now, sees the delivery carts bringing grain from the countryside, heavy wagons pulled by oxen or large draft horses, their drivers calling out greetings to the brewers who emerge to check their deliveries. The grain merchants know every brewer by name, know their usual orders and their payment histories. By midday, the street fills with workers on their lunch breaks, many of them stopping at the various alehouses to drink small beer, a weaker brew that's safer than water and provides some nourishment. The alehouses are often attached to or associated with breweries, buying their beer directly from the source and serving it fresh. The smell of cooking food mixes with the brewery smells, creating an atmosphere that's uniquely working-class King's Landing. Afternoon brings the barrel makers, the coopers who craft and repair the oak barrels that every brewery depends on. The sound of hammers on hoops echoes down the street, punctuated by the occasional conversation shouted from one workshop to another. Coopers and brewers have a relationship of mutual dependence. Without good barrels, brewing is impossible, and without breweries, coopers have no customers. Evening is when the alehouses truly come alive, filling with workers from across the city who've finished their day's labour and want a drink before heading home. The noise level rises as the sun sets, laughter and conversation spilling out into the street, occasionally punctuated by arguments or the sound of breaking pottery. The City Watch makes regular patrols through the district, keeping order but generally tolerating the rowdiness, as long as it doesn't turn violent. Night brings a different character to the district. Some breweries, like yours, operate in shifts to maintain fires and monitor fermentations. You can often see the glow of fires through windows, smell the sweet aroma of overnight mashing, hear the occasional sound of a brewer checking his barrels. The street becomes quieter, but never completely silent. King's Landing never truly sleeps, and the brewery district is no exception. The waterfront is just 3 streets down the hill, close enough that on certain days you can smell the sea and hear the calls of the dock workers loading and unloading ships. Some of your beer ends up going to ships, sold through middlemen who broker deals between breweries and sea captains. It's decent business, though the prices are lower than what you'd get selling direct to alehouses. The wealthier parts of the city are distant from here, both geographically and socially. The Red Keep looms in the distance, visible from certain vantage points along Guild Street. Its red stone walls and towers a constant reminder of royal power. But in the brewery district, the concerns of kings and nobles feel distant. Here, people worry about grain prices, barrel shortages, and whether the city tax collectors will find those hidden barrels in the back cellar. The street has its own community, its own rhythms and relationships. You know the grain merchants by name, can identify the different coopers by their hammer patterns, recognise the regular customers who buy beer to take home in their own jugs. There's the old woman who sweeps the street every morning, the beggar who sits by the corner and never asks for money but always accepts it gratefully, the stray dogs who've learned which brewery doors might offer scraps. This is your corner of King's Landing, the small world within the larger city where you spend your days, brewing beer and earning your living. It's not glamorous or exciting, but it's real and solid and honest. The work is hard but straightforward. The rewards are modest but reliable, and you know your place in the order of things. And right now, your place is back in the brewery, because the wort in the copper kettle is beginning to steam, which means it's approaching boiling temperature. You can hear it starting to rumble, the first signs of the rolling boil that's necessary for proper brewing. Time to return to work. The wort in the copper kettle is now at a full rolling boil, its surface churning and bubbling, like a cauldron in a witch's tale. This is one of the most critical phases of brewing. The boil sterilises the wort, concentrates the flavours, and allows the hops to release their bitterness and aroma. You must maintain the boil for at least an hour, possibly longer, depending on the style of beer you're making. The heat from the boiling kettle is intense, creating a warm, humid atmosphere in the brewing area that makes you sweat even though the morning is still cool. You use a long wooden paddle to stir occasionally, making sure nothing scorches on the bottom, though with a proper boil, this is rarely a problem. The steam rises in thick clouds, carrying the sweet smell of malt throughout the brewery and out into the street. Now comes time for the hops. You retrieve the bag of dried hop flowers from the cool room where they're stored to preserve their delicate flavour. The bag is made of oiled canvas, sealed tight to keep moisture and light away from the precious flowers within. When you open it, the aroma of hops bursts forth, piney and floral, bitter and green, a smell that's distinct from anything else in the brewery. Hops are expensive, imported from the Reach where they grow in neat rows along tall wooden frames. Different varieties have different characteristics. Some are more bitter, others more aromatic, and skilled brewers blend different types to achieve specific flavour profiles. Your supplier, Mara at the market, knows her hops well and has taught you to recognise quality by smell and appearance. You measure out 4 pounds of hops for this batch, separating them into 2 portions. The first portion goes in now, at the start of the boil. These hops will contribute bitterness, the sharp edge that balances the sweetness of the malt and makes beer refreshing rather than cloying. You scatter the hop flowers across the surface of the boiling wort, and they immediately begin to swirl and tumble in the rolling liquid. The aroma changes immediately as the hops hit the boiling wort. The sweet malt smell becomes overlaid with the bitter, herbal scent of hops, creating the complex bouquet that characterises beer. You breathe deeply, enjoying the smell that's become so familiar you sometimes forget others might find it strange or unpleasant. The boil must continue for at least 60 minutes after adding the first hops. This is time you can use for other tasks, though you must check the kettle regularly to ensure it doesn't boil over or boil too vigorously. An overly vigorous boil wastes fuel and can create harsh flavours. A gentle rolling boil is ideal, constant movement but not violent. You use this time to clean the first kettle, the one you used for mashing. Hot water and a stiff brush remove the sticky remnants of grain and wort, and you rinse thoroughly until the copper gleams clean. Cleaning is perhaps the most important task in brewing. Dirty equipment leads to infected beer, and infected beer is worthless. Every surface that touches wort or beer must be perfectly clean. While you work, you hear the street outside coming more fully to life. The rattle of cartwheels, the calls of vendors, the general hum of a working neighbourhood beginning its day. At one point, you hear the town crier passing by, his voice carrying through the morning. Hear ye, reports from Dragonstone. Witnesses claim to have seen dragons flying over the island. The citadel urges calm and rational thought. Dragons have been extinct for over a century. You pause in your scrubbing, listening. Dragon rumours have been circulating for weeks now, growing more persistent despite official denials. Some say the Targaryens still have dragon eggs, carefully hidden and preserved. Others claim to have seen large flying creatures in the distance, though these sightings are always vague and second-hand. Most people treat it as fantasy, stories told by attention seekers and fools. But there's something in the air lately, a sense that the world might be changing in ways no one can predict. The old order feels less stable than it did a few years ago. The king's health is poor, succession questions loom, and various noble houses maneuver for advantage. Into this uncertainty come whispers of dragons returning, of magic awakening, of the world becoming strange again. You return to your cleaning, pushing the thoughts aside. Dragons or no dragons, beer must still be brewed. Whatever happens, in the wider world, people will still need ale to drink, and brewers will still need to earn their living. Focus on what you can control. The fires, the kettles, the careful timing of each stage of brewing. After 45 minutes of boiling, you add the second portion of hops. These are for aroma rather than bitterness. The shorter boiling time preserves their more delicate flavours and smells, adding complexity to the finished beer. You scatter them across the kettle's surface and stir them in gently, watching them swirl and distribute through the boiling wort. The final 15 minutes of boiling pass slowly. You tend the fire, keeping it steady. You check the fermentation cellar again, making sure temperatures remain stable. You sweep the floor around the kettles, gathering up spilled grain and hop fragments. The work is endless and repetitive, but that's the nature of brewing. Constant attention to detail, constant small tasks, that add up to the larger goal. Finally, the hour is complete. You pull the fire from beneath the kettle, using a long iron rake to drag the burning wood and coals out onto the stone apron in front of the firebox. The coals will cool there, eventually becoming ash that you'll add to the garden behind the brewery, where a few vegetables grow in the poor soil. Now the wort must cool before you can add yeast. Hot wort will kill yeast, so cooling is essential, but it must happen relatively quickly to minimise the risk of contamination. You open the wooden shutters on the windows, allowing cool morning air to flow through the brewery. Then you begin the laborious process of cooling the kettle. Some brewers use a coil of copper tubing through which cold water flows, placed inside the kettle to cool the wort from within. Your brewery doesn't have such modern equipment. Instead, you use the traditional method, time and exposure to air. You remove the kettle's lid, allowing heat to escape, and stir regularly to bring hot wort from the bottom to the surface, where it can cool faster. The cooling takes hours, during which you must remain vigilant. The warm wort is vulnerable to infection from wild yeasts and bacteria in the air, so you cover the kettle with a clean cloth that allows heat to escape while blocking most contaminants. You check the temperature regularly by dipping your hand in. First it's far too hot, then just hot, then warm, finally reaching the point where you can hold your hand in the wort comfortably. That's cool enough. While the wort cools, you prepare the yeast. The brewery maintains several yeast strains, each one carefully tended and propagated from batch to batch. You keep them in the cool room, in small wooden casks that protect them from temperature swings and contamination. The yeast is living, active, and precious. Without good yeast, there can be no beer. You draw off about a gallon of yeast slurry from the cask, checking its smell and appearance. Good yeast smells clean, and slightly fruity, with a hint of bread dough. Bad yeast smells sour or off, and its appearance is watery or discoloured. This yeast looks and smells perfect, thick and creamy and vital. The wort has cooled sufficiently. Now comes the moment of transfer, moving the cooled wort from the copper kettle to a wooden fermentation barrel. This is physically demanding work, requiring strength and care. You position an empty oak barrel beneath the kettle's spigot, checking that it's perfectly clean and sanitized with boiling water. Opening the spigot releases a stream of golden brown wort into the barrel. The liquid flows steadily, and you watch carefully to ensure nothing goes wrong. No splashing that might introduce unwanted oxygen, no overflow that would waste precious beer. The barrel fills slowly, the wort's surface rising steadily, until the barrel is perhaps 4/5 full, leaving room for the foam that fermentation will create. When the transfer is complete, you add the yeast, pouring the thick slurry into the barrel and stirring it thoroughly with a clean wooden paddle. The yeast disperses through the wort in creamy swirls, and you know that within hours it will begin its work, consuming sugars and producing alcohol and carbon dioxide. The transformation from sweet wort to bitter beer is entirely the yeast's doing. Brewers just create the conditions that allow yeast to work. You seal the barrel with a bung that has a small hole drilled through it, allowing fermentation gases to escape, while preventing air and contamination from entering. Then, with the help of a wooden lever and considerable effort, you roll the barrel to the cellar stairs and carefully guide it down into the cool fermentation room below. The barrel settles into its place among the others, joining the community of fermenting beers at various stages of completion. This one will ferment for about 2 weeks, transforming from sweet wort into proper ale, ready to serve to the thirsty citizens of King's Landing. You climb back up the cellar stairs, satisfied with the morning's work. One batch successfully brewed, the kettles cleaned and ready for the next session, the brewery running smoothly. The sun is higher now, approaching midday, and your stomach reminds you that you've been working for hours without eating. But before you can break for lunch, there's a knock at the brewery door, sharp and official sounding, the kind of knock that immediately puts you on alert. You wipe your hands on your apron and go to answer, already suspecting who you'll find on the other side. Standing at the door are 2 men in the clothing that marks them unmistakably as royal tax collectors. Good wool doublets bearing the crown's emblem, well-made boots, and the air of authority that comes from representing the king's interests. The older one carries a leather folio, probably containing records and forms. The younger one looks around, with the alert eyes of someone trained to notice discrepancies. "Good day," the older collector says formally. "I am Merrick, and this is my assistant Pate. We're conducting routine inspections of breweries in this district, verifying production against tax records. May we enter?" It's not really a question. Refusing entry to royal tax collectors is technically possible, but practically foolish. They'll just return with city watch members and make your life much more difficult. "Of course," you say, stepping aside. "Welcome to the King's Barrel Brewery." They enter, and you notice immediately how Merrick's eyes scan the brewing floor, taking inventory with practiced efficiency. He's done this before, many times. He knows what to look for, where brewers might hide production, how to spot discrepancies between actual output and reported output. "You are the head brewer?" Merrick asks, pulling out a document from his folio. "Yes, sir. John, son of Willem. I've been brewing here for 10 years. Head brewer for the last 5, Merrick nods, making a note. "And you brew how many batches per week on average?" 3 or 4, depending on demand and supplies. Each batch produces about 25 to 30 barrels. So roughly 100 barrels per week, 400 per month. Merrick's tone is casual, but you can hear the calculation in his voice, comparing your answer to whatever records he has. In a good month, yes. Less in winter when demand drops, sometimes more in summer, when the city is thirsty. You try to keep your voice level, factual, neither defensive. nor overly helpful. Pate, the younger assistant, has moved to examine the copper kettles, running his hand along their surfaces, checking their capacity. He peers into the main kettle, still warm from this morning's boil, then turns to the second kettle. He's learning the trade, understanding how to estimate production from equipment capacity. Your tax records show you've paid duty on 350 barrels in the last month, Merrick says, consulting his documents. Does that seem accurate to you? You nod. Yes, sir. It was a slower month. We had trouble with grain delivery. The usual supplier's crop was poor, and we had to source from elsewhere, which took time. It's a plausible lie, and partly true. The grain delivery was late, though not as late as you're suggesting. In reality, you brewed closer to 400 barrels last month, but 50 of those are in the hidden cellar, unreported and untaxed. It's a risk you take every month, skimming just enough to improve your profit margin without being so obvious that inspectors will certainly catch you. Merrick studies you for a moment, his expression neutral. We'll need to inspect your cellars, count your current inventory. Of course, the fermentation cellar is this way. You lead them down the stone steps, your heart beating slightly faster despite your outward calm. The main cellar is perfectly fine. The barrels there match your records exactly. It's the hidden cellar you're worried about, though they'd have to know where to look to find it. The entrance is behind a rack of apparently empty barrels, concealed by a wooden panel that looks like part of the wall. In the main cellar, Merrick and Pate count barrels methodically, Pate calling out numbers, while Merrick makes notes. 18 barrels currently fermenting, 5 ready for tapping. Their count matches your visible inventory exactly, which you knew it would. Do you sell directly to alehouses, or through middlemen? Merrick asks, still writing. Both. About half direct sales, half through merchants who handle distribution. The direct sales are to smaller alehouses nearby, regular customers. The merchant sales go all over the city. And you keep records of all sales? Yes, sir, in the ledger upstairs. You do keep records, carefully maintained, showing every barrel you officially brew and sell. They're accurate for the reported barrels. The unreported ones are sold for cash to customers who don't ask questions, the money carefully hidden rather than deposited with a money changer who would create records. After finishing in the cellar, you lead them back upstairs and provide the sales ledger, a heavy book with thick pages covered in neat handwriting. Merrick spends perhaps 20 minutes reviewing entries, occasionally asking questions about specific customers or dates. You answer each question truthfully. The ledger is designed to withstand exactly this kind of inspection. Finally, Merrick closes the ledger and exchanges a glance with Pate that you can't quite interpret. Everything appears to be in order, he says, though something in his tone suggests he's not entirely convinced. However, I'll note that your reported production is somewhat lower than what we'd expect from a brewery of this size with your equipment. You shrug, keeping your expression neutral. It's been a slower year. Competition in the district is fierce and grain prices have been high. We're doing our best. Merrick nods slowly. Of course. Well, we'll be conducting follow-up inspections periodically. I trust your records will continue to be accurate and complete. It's a warning, politely delivered, but unmistakable. They suspect something but can't prove it. You'll need to be even more careful in coming months. Perhaps report slightly higher production to deflect suspicion, maybe even pay tax on a few barrels. You don't actually brew just to make the numbers look better. Thank you for your cooperation, Merrick says, returning his folio to his bag. We'll see ourselves out. After they leave, you stand for a moment in the quiet brewery, feeling the tension slowly drain from your shoulders. That could have gone worse. They could have found the hidden cellar, could have arrested you on the spot for tax evasion. As it is, you've bought yourself some time, though you know they'll be watching more closely now. The knock at the door has broken your work rhythm, and you decide this is a good time for that delayed lunch break. You have bread and cheese wrapped in cloth in your room upstairs, and a jug of small beer to wash it down. Simple food, but satisfying after a morning of hard work. and the stress of the tax inspection. You climb the narrow stairs to your room, a space barely 10 feet square with a bed, a chest for your belongings, and a small table with one chair. The window overlooks Guild Street, providing a view of the neighbourhood's daily life. You sit by the window, eating slowly, watching the street below. A grain cart rumbles past, heading toward one of the other breweries. Two women argue about something in the middle of the street, their voices rising and falling in a rhythm that suggests this is a familiar disagreement rather than a serious fight. A child runs past chasing a dog, both of them seeming equally excited about the game. Normal life, continuing regardless of tax collectors and dragon rumours and political intrigue in the Red Keep. This is what you appreciate about the brewery district. It's focused on immediate, practical concerns. Beer must be brewed, bread must be baked, barrels must be made. The grand movements of history feel distant here, important perhaps, but not as immediately pressing as whether today's batch ferments properly. You finish your lunch, drain the jug of small beer, and head back downstairs. The afternoon's work awaits. You need to check the fermentation temperatures again, clean more equipment, and visit the market to buy those hops old Tim mentioned. The tax collectors have taken some of your time, but the work doesn't pause for such interruptions. In the brewing business, there's always something that needs doing, always another batch to plan, another barrel to check, another task that contributes to the endless cycle of production. And that's fine with you. You'd rather stay busy than have too much time to worry about things you can't control, like whether dragons are really returning to the world, or whether the next tax inspection will finally catch you out. After checking that all the fermentation barrels are at proper temperature and the fires are burning correctly, you prepare to visit the market. You untie your brewing apron and hang it on its hook, then pull on a cleaner overshirt that's less stained with wort and beer. Your leather purse contains the coins you'll need, silver stags and copper pennies, kept in separate compartments to make transactions easier. The walk to the market takes about 15 minutes through the winding streets of King's Landing. You follow Guild Street down toward the waterfront, where it intersects with the larger thoroughfare called Harbour Way. The market sprawls across several blocks near the docks, a chaotic collection of permanent stalls and temporary stands where merchants sell everything from fresh fish to fine cloth. The afternoon sun is warm and the streets are busy with people conducting business. You pass the cooper's shop where you buy your barrels, the smith who repairs your kettle when it develops leaks, the baker whose bread you buy for your daily meals. You know these people by name, exchange greetings, maintain the small relationships that make neighbourhood life work. Harbour Way is wider than Guild Street, busy with carts and riders and people on foot, all moving in different directions with different purposes. The smell changes as you approach the waterfront, less yeast and grain, more salt air and fish and tar from the ships being maintained in the harbour. Gulls wheel overhead, crying their harsh calls, fighting over scraps. The market is overwhelming in its size and chaos. Hundreds of stalls are arranged in rough rows, though the organisation is haphazard and changes constantly as merchants arrive and depart. The noise is tremendous, sellers calling out their wares, buyers haggling over prices, the general din of humanity conducting commerce. You can smell spices and rotting, vegetables, fresh bread and raw meat, perfume and sweat and the sea. You navigate through the crowds with the practiced ease of someone who knows these paths. The fish stalls are near the waterfront, their goods displayed on beds of ice brought down from northern mountains. The vegetable sellers occupy the centre section, their produce arranged in colourful pyramids that attract the eye. The cloth merchants line the far edge, their bolts of fabric creating walls of colour. Your destination is near the spice sellers, where Mara runs a stall specialising in brewing supplies, hops, yeast cultures, herbs for flavouring, and various specialty grains. Her stall is easy to spot, marked by bundles of dried hop flowers hanging from the wooden frame, and the distinctive smell of hops that carries even in this riot of scents. Mara is perhaps 50 years old, weathered by decades of outdoor market work, with strong hands and sharp eyes that miss nothing. She's been supplying breweries in King's Landing for 30 years and knows the business as well as anyone. When she sees you approaching, she smiles in genuine welcome. "John, good to see you. I was wondering when you'd come by. Old Tim told me you were getting low on hops." "That obvious," you reply, smiling back. "I need about £20, if you have good quality available." "I have excellent quality. Fresh shipment from the Reach just 3 days ago. The merchant brought them packed in oiled canvas. They're still moist and aromatic. Perfect condition." She pulls down one of the hanging bundles and opens it, releasing a burst of hop aroma that makes you nod in appreciation. You take a few hop flowers between your fingers, rubbing them to release their oils, then smelling carefully. The aroma is exactly right, piney and citrusy, with good bitterness and minimal vegetal notes. These are quality hops that will make good beer. How much, you ask, knowing that price negotiation is expected in the market, even between regular customers. For you, because you're regular, and you pay promptly, 4 coppers per pound. That's fair for this quality. It is fair. You've paid more for worse hops from other suppliers. I'll take £20 and throw in a small packet of that orange peel you have there. I'm thinking of experimenting with a spiced ale." Mara nods, already measuring out hops on her scale, a brass balance with weights marked in pounds and ounces. "Orange peel works well in autumn ales. Just don't use too much. A little goes a long way. I'll give you 4 ounces, no extra charge since you're buying bulk hops." While she measures and bags your purchase, wrapping the hops in oiled canvas to preserve their freshness, you make small talk about business conditions, weather, and the general state of the market. This is how commerce works in King's Landing. Transactions are also social interactions, opportunities to maintain relationships and exchange information. "Have you heard these dragon rumours?" Mara asks as she ties off the hop bundle. "People are all worked up about it. I had a customer yesterday who wanted to buy extra supplies to stock up, said he was preparing for uncertain times." "The town criers have been announcing it all morning," you confirm, "though I don't know what to make of it. Dragons have been extinct for over a century. Even if someone had eggs, hatching them and raising the creatures would take years." "Maybe. But there's something in the air lately, don't you think? Like things are shifting in ways we can't quite see yet." Mara hands you the wrapped hops and the small packet of orange peel. "That'll be 8 silver stags." You count out the coins, checking each one briefly, a habit in a city where clipped and counterfeit coins are common enough to warrant caution. The coins are good, and Mara accepts them with a nod, depositing them in the locked box beneath her stall. "Take care walking back," she advises. City Watch has been more active lately, checking papers and asking questions. The king's advisors are nervous about something. You thank her for both the supplies and the warning, then begin the journey back through the market. The crowds seem even denser now as afternoon progresses toward evening, workers finishing their day and stopping to buy food for their families. You keep one hand on your purse and stay alert. Markets are known for pickpockets, and carrying valuable brewing supplies makes you a more attractive target. On your way back through the market, you pass a public message board where official announcements are posted. A small crowd has gathered around a freshly posted notice, and curiosity draws you over to see what's causing interest. The notice is from the King's Council, written in formal language that manages to sound both reassuring and ominous. Citizens are advised that reports of dragons near Dragonstone remain unconfirmed. The Citadel's Meisters have found no evidence to support claims of living dragons. Spreading unfounded rumours is discouraged. All loyal subjects should remain calm and trust in the wisdom of the Crown and its advisors. The notice saying rumours are unfounded, while also saying spreading them is discouraged, creates exactly the opposite effect from what was probably intended. People read between the lines, interpreting official denials as confirmation that something unusual is happening. The crowd around the notice board murmurs and speculates, and you hear half a dozen different theories about what might really be happening. You continue back toward the brewery district, the heavy bundle of hops slung over your shoulder and the packet of orange peel secure in your pocket. The walk gives you time to think about what you've heard today: the tax collector's visit, the dragon rumours, the sense that the city is on edge about something. But when you arrive back at the brewery, the familiar smells and sounds ground you back in the practical present, whatever is happening. In the wider world, beer must still be brewed. The kettles don't care about dragons or politics, and the yeast doesn't ferment faster or slower based on royal proclamations. You store the hops in the cool room, carefully labelling them with today's date and the supplier's name. Record keeping is important for quality control and for resolving any issues if a batch turns out poorly. Then you return to the main brewing floor, where the afternoon's work awaits. The day shift is past its midpoint now, and you settle into the familiar rhythm of maintenance and monitoring that fills the hours between major brewing sessions. There's always something to check, something to clean, something to prepare for tomorrow's work. The afternoon passes in the steady rhythm of brewery work, checking fermentation temperatures every hour, recording them in the log, adjusting the cellar venting to maintain stable conditions. You clean the copper kettles again, polishing them until they shine, removing even the smallest residue that might affect future batches. The cleaning is meditative, repetitive work that lets your mind wander while your hands stay busy. Around 3 hours past noon, you hear a familiar knock at the side door. 3 quick raps, then 2 slow ones. That's Septon Willem's signal from the Dragon's Head Brewery across the street. You open the door to find the old brewer standing there with a clay jug in his hands. "Afternoon, John. I've got a batch of my dark ale that came out particularly well. Thought you might like to try it." Willem is 70 if he's a day, with white hair and a face creased by decades of work, but his eyes are sharp and his hands still steady. Come in. I've got some of my amber ale that turned out nicely too. We can trade tastes." This is a common practice among the district's brewers, sharing samples, getting feedback, maintaining the professional relationships that make the community work. You lead Willem to the small break area and produce 2 wooden cups, filling one from his jug and one from your own barrel. The dark ale is excellent, rich and malty, with notes of chocolate and coffee, smooth despite its strength. "This is really good, Willem. What did you do differently?" "Darker roast on some of the barley, and I let it ferment an extra week. Patience made the difference." He sips your amber ale and nods approvingly. "Yours has good balance. Hops are perfect, bitter enough to cut the malt but not overpowering." You discuss brewing techniques for perhaps 20 minutes, comparing notes on grain suppliers, debating the merits of different yeast strains, sharing small trade secrets in the way that professionals do when they respect each other's skill. These conversations are valuable. You learn as much from other brewers as you ever did from formal apprenticeship. "Did the tax collectors visit you today?" you ask, keeping your tone casual. Willem nods, his expression souring slightly. "Aye, early this morning. Counted every barrel, checked every entry in my ledger. They're being more thorough than usual. Makes me think someone high up wants increased revenue. Or they're preparing for something. Wars are expensive." You don't say more than that. Even with a trusted neighbour, some things are better left unspoken. "Aye. Well, we'll manage. We always do." Willem drains his cup and stands, preparing to leave. "Thanks for the taste. Stop by the Dragon's Head tomorrow if you have time. I'm brewing a batch with some experimental hops from Dawn. Might be interesting." After Willem leaves, you return to work, but his visit has reminded you of something you've been meaning to do. The hidden cellar behind the coal room needs checking. You haven't been down there in 3 days, and the barrels stored there require the same attention as those in the main cellar. The entrance to the hidden cellar is concealed behind a rack of apparently empty barrels in the coal storage room. You move the rack aside. It's lighter than it looks, designed to be movable by one person, revealing a wooden panel that looks like part of the wall, but actually swings inward on concealed hinges. The hidden cellar is much smaller than the main one, perhaps 10 feet square, carved from the bedrock and accessed by a short ladder. It's cool and dark, lit only by the candle you carry down. 3 barrels sit in the shadows, each one containing ale that you've brewed but not reported to the tax collectors. You check each barrel carefully, ensuring the bungs are properly sealed and no leaks have developed. You sniff each bung, making sure fermentation is proceeding normally, with no off-smells that would indicate problems. Everything seems fine. These barrels will be ready to tap within a week, and you already have buyers lined up who pay in cash and ask no questions. The hidden cellar represents a calculated risk. If discovered, you could be fined, possibly imprisoned, definitely put out of business. But the profit margin on these unreported barrels is the difference between barely surviving and living comfortably. Every brewer in the district does something similar. It's an accepted practice, if officially illegal, a way to balance the heavy tax burden against the need to earn a living. You climb back up, replace the wooden panel, and move the barrel rack back into position. No one who didn't know the cellar was there would ever spot it. The seams are invisible. The panel blends perfectly with the surrounding wall, and the barrel rack looks like exactly what it appears to be: a storage solution for empty containers. Back in the main brewery, you check the time by the sun's position, visible through the high windows. Perhaps 2 hours until sunset, which means 4 hours until the end of your shift. The brewing day is winding down, though there's still work to be done. You decide to start preparing tomorrow's batch, measuring out grain and checking that you have all the necessary supplies. Preparation is key to efficient brewing. Having everything ready before you start means the actual brewing process goes smoothly, without interruptions to hunt for ingredients or equipment. You measure 30 pounds of pale malt into a wooden bin, adding 2 pounds of crystal malt for colour and sweetness. This will be a standard amber ale, the bread and butter product that accounts for most of your sales. Nothing fancy, just good reliable beer that ale houses can sell at a profit and workers can afford to drink after their shifts. The grain measurement is done by weight, using the large balance scale that sits near the grain bins. You've calibrated the scale with official weights, ensuring accuracy. Short-changing customers with light measures is both illegal and bad for business. The brewery's reputation depends on consistent quality and fair dealing. While weighing grain, you hear the street door open and the sound of someone entering the brewery. You look up to see Jenna from the Hammer and Anvil, the experimental brewer from up the street. She looks excited, almost feverish, her eyes bright with what you recognise as the enthusiasm of someone who's had a brewing breakthrough. "John, I've got to show you something. I've been working on a new technique for clarifying beer using isinglass from fish bladders. The results are amazing, crystal clear beer without any sediment." She's practically bouncing with enthusiasm. You set down the grain scoop and give her your attention. Jenna's experiments often lead to interesting innovations, even if they sometimes also lead to disasters. "Tell me about it. How does it work?" She launches into an explanation of the technique, describing how the isinglass binds to yeast and proteins in the beer, pulling them out of solution and leaving the liquid brilliantly clear. It's fascinating, though you have questions about cost and practicality for large-scale brewing. "The main issue is sourcing good isinglass," Jenna admits. "It's expensive, and you need to prepare it properly. But for special batches, premium ales that command higher prices, it might be worth it." You discuss the technique for perhaps half an hour, asking questions about process details, sharing your own thoughts about potential modifications. This is the kind of conversation you love. Fellow craftspeople sharing knowledge, building on each other's ideas, pushing the boundaries of what's possible in brewing. Before Jenna leaves, she mentions the dragon rumours. Some of the merchants at the harbour are saying they've seen strange lights in the sky to the east toward Dragonstone. Probably just stories, but it's got people nervous. One of my regular customers, a sea captain, says sailors are refusing to take certain routes because they're afraid of dragons. Afraid of extinct creatures? You say skeptically. Afraid of uncertainty. If dragons come back, what else might change? The whole order of the world is based on certain assumptions, and if those assumptions turn out to be wrong, she shrugs. People don't handle uncertainty well. They'd rather believe in dragons than admit they don't know what's happening. After Jenna leaves, you think about her words while returning to your preparations. The dragon rumours are probably nothing, but they're definitely affecting people's behaviour, creating anxiety and speculation that ripples through the city in unpredictable ways. You finish measuring the grain for tomorrow's batch and cover the bin with a cloth to keep it clean. Then you check the main fermentation cellar one more time, confirming that all temperatures are stable and all fermentations are progressing normally. Everything is in order, proceeding according to plan. The sun is lower now, painting the brewery's interior with golden light that streams through the high windows and illuminates the dust motes floating in the air. The day is moving toward evening, and your shift is moving toward its conclusion. But there are still a few hours of work remaining, and you have one more task you want to accomplish before the day ends. Bottling some finished beer for a special customer who's willing to pay premium prices for small quantities of your best ale. Bottling is a task you do perhaps twice a week, and always with care. Most of your beer is sold in barrels directly to alehouses, who serve it fresh from the cask, but some customers prefer bottled beer. Wealthy merchants, minor nobles, ship captains who want supplies for long voyages. Bottled beer is more expensive due to the extra work and materials, but it commands good prices and provides a nice profit margin. The bottles themselves are valuable, made of thick green glass and sealed with cork stoppers. You have perhaps 40 bottles in your collection, reused over and over, carefully washed between each filling. The bottles sit on a wooden rack near the bottling station, catching the afternoon light and glowing like emeralds. You select one of your best barrels, an amber ale that's been aging for 3 weeks, well past primary fermentation, and into the mellowing period where flavours integrate and smooth out. This beer is worth bottling, worthy of the premium prices that bottled beer commands. First, you clean the bottles one more time, even though they were washed after their last use. You fill each bottle with hot water and a bit of brewing soap, then scrub the interior with a bottle brush, a long-handled brush with bristles that reach to the bottom of the bottle. The cleaning must be thorough. Any residue or contamination will ruin the beer. After cleaning comes sanitizing. You have a solution of water and herbs that has antibacterial properties, not as effective as the stronger chemicals that alchemists use, but good enough for your purposes. Each bottle gets a rinse with this solution, then is set upside down on the rack to drain. While the bottles drain, you prepare the bottling station. This consists of a wooden frame that holds the barrel at a height convenient for filling bottles, with a tap mechanism that allows you to control the flow of beer. You roll the chosen barrel from the cellar, careful not to disturb the sediment that has settled to the bottom, and position it on the frame. The cork stoppers have been soaking in warm water to make them pliable. You test one by squeezing it. The cork compresses easily, but springs back to its original shape, which is exactly right. Old dried out corks won't seal properly, and you've learned to keep your cork supply fresh and well maintained. Now comes the actual bottling. You place the first bottle under the tap, then open the valve slowly. Golden brown ale flows into the bottle, and you watch carefully to fill it to just the right level. High enough to minimize air contact, low enough to leave room for the cork. When the level is right, you close the tap and set the bottle aside. Then insert a cork into its mouth. The corking requires a special tool, a wooden mallet and a cork driver that compresses the cork and forces it into the bottle neck. You position the cork, place the driver on top, then tap firmly with the mallet. The cork slides into place with a satisfying sound, sealing the bottle completely. You repeat this process for 12 bottles, working carefully and methodically. Each bottle is filled to the proper level, each cork is seated firmly, each bottle is checked for leaks or problems. The work is repetitive, but requires constant attention. One moment of distraction can lead to overfilled bottles or poorly sealed corks. When all 12 bottles are filled and corked, you clean each one's exterior, wiping away any beer that's spilled during filling. Then you apply labels, small squares of paper with the brewery's name and the ale's type written in careful script. The labels are attached with a paste made from flour and water, simple but effective. The finished bottles are beautiful in their own way, uniform in size, each one containing exactly the same amount of beer. The labels neat and professional looking. You pack them carefully into a wooden crate, separated by straw, to prevent them from clinking together and potentially breaking. This crate represents several days' wages from the labour involved and the premium quality of the beer. Your regular customer for bottled beer is a merchant named Tobias, who supplies provisions to ship captains. He'll arrive tomorrow to collect this crate and pay his usual price, 1 silver stag per bottle, which is expensive but fair for the quality and convenience. The bottled beer will end up on ships sailing to Essos or around Westeros, consumed by captains and wealthy passengers who can afford such luxuries. After finishing the bottling, you return the barrel to the cellar, checking again that all fermentation temperatures remain stable. The evening is approaching, and the brewery is taking on the golden quality of late daylight. The fires under the kettles have burned down to coals, no longer needed until tomorrow's brewing begins. You take a few minutes to simply sit in the break area, drinking a cup of small beer and letting your muscles rest. The day has been long and productive. A successful batch brewed, supplies purchased, special bottling completed, and numerous small maintenance tasks accomplished. This is what good brewery management looks like. Constant attention to detail, constant forward planning, constant execution of necessary tasks. Through the open windows, you can hear the evening sounds of King's Landing, the calls of street vendors ending their day, the clatter of shops closing shutters, the general transition from work to rest that marks sunset in a working neighbourhood. The city watch will be changing shifts soon, fresh guards replacing those who've patrolled all day. The street door opens and you look up to see old Tim arriving early for his shift. That's unusual. He's normally precise about arriving exactly on time, not a minute early or late. His expression is troubled, and you stand to meet him. "Evening, Tim. You're early. Something wrong?" "Maybe, probably nothing, but..." He hesitates, then continues in a lower voice. "I was at the Drowned Sailor Tavern, having a cup before coming to work. There were sailors there, men off a ship that just arrived from Dragonstone. They're saying they saw something flying over the island. Something big, with wings that caught the sun." You feel a chill despite the warm evening. Dragons? They didn't say the word, but what else could it be? Birds don't fly that high. And the description, "John, I've lived 70 years and never believed I'd hear people seriously talking about dragons as something real, something current, not just history." You don't know what to say to that. The rumours have been persistent, but this is the first report you've heard from someone who claims direct knowledge rather than third-hand speculation. "What do you think it means?" Tim shakes his head slowly. "I don't know. Change, certainly. The old order breaking down, maybe. When impossible things become possible, all bets are off about what comes next." He moves toward the brewing log, preparing to review the day's notes and take over the shift. But one thing doesn't change. Beer must still be brewed, and we still have work to do. Whatever happens with dragons or politics, people will still need ale. It's the same conclusion you reached earlier, but hearing it from old Tim makes it feel more solid, more reliable. The world might be changing in ways no one can predict, but some things remain constant. The craft of brewing, the community of the brewery district, the simple necessity of work. You give Tim a thorough briefing on the day's activities, showing him which barrels are ready for tapping, which fermentations need watching, which tasks are pending for tomorrow. He takes notes in his careful handwriting, asking clarifying questions when needed. The handoff between shifts is smooth and professional, the result of working together for years and developing a reliable system. Finally, as the sun touches the western horizon and the sky begins to turn orange and purple, you untie your apron for the last time today and hang it on its hook. Your shift is ending, and you can go upstairs to your room, eat a simple dinner, and rest before tomorrow begins the cycle again. "Take care, John," Tim says, as you head for the stairs. "Keep your ears open and your mouth shut about those hidden barrels. The tax collectors are looking harder than usual, and I'd hate to see you get caught." "I'm always careful," you assure him. "Good night, Tim. May your shift be quiet and uneventful." You climb the stairs to your small room, feeling the accumulated fatigue of the day in your legs and back. The work is honest and satisfying, but it's still work, still demands physical effort that leaves you tired by evening. In your room, you light a candle against the gathering darkness and prepare a simple meal: bread, cheese, an apple, and a cup of your own ale. You eat slowly by the window, watching as King's Landing transitions from day to night, the streets gradually emptying as people return to their homes. Your room is small but adequate, perhaps 10 feet on each side, with a sloped ceiling that follows the roofline. The furniture is simple and functional: a narrow bed with a straw mattress and wool blankets, a wooden chest for your belongings, a small table with one chair, and a shelf that holds your few books and personal items. A single window looks out over Guild Street, its shutters currently open to admit the evening air. The room is on the 3rd floor of the brewery building, which means you have to climb 2 flights of narrow stairs to reach it. But the height also means you get good cross breeze on hot days and a view that extends across much of the brewery district. From your window, you can see the rooftops of neighbouring buildings, the narrow streets between them, and in the distance, the upper levels of wealthier areas climbing the hills toward the Red Keep. You settle at the small table with your simple dinner, eating slowly while watching the street below. The evening activity is winding down. Fewer carts on the street now, fewer people hurrying between destinations. The alehouses are filling up with their evening customers, and you can hear the muted sound of conversation and occasional laughter drifting up from the establishments that line the street. The bread is 2 days old, starting to go stale at the edges, but still good when torn into chunks. The cheese is sharp and crumbly, made from goat's milk by a farmer who sells at the market. The apple is slightly mealy but sweet, probably one of the last from autumn's harvest before winter storage begins. In earnest, the meal is simple but satisfying, the kind of food that working people throughout King's Landing eat every day. The ale you're drinking is your own, drawn from a small barrel you keep in your room for personal use. It's not your best work. This batch was slightly overhopped, giving it a sharper bitterness than ideal, but it's perfectly drinkable, and certainly better than the swill some of the cheaper alehouses serve. You make a mental note to adjust the hop schedule on your next batch of this style. After eating, you sit for a while simply watching the darkening sky and thinking about the day's events. The tax collector's visit troubles you more than you want to admit. Their increased scrutiny suggests that pressure is coming from higher up, which means you might need to rethink your strategy of hiding production. The profit from those unreported barrels is significant, but not worth the risk of imprisonment or losing the brewery entirely. On the other hand, if you report all your production and pay full taxes, your profit margin shrinks to almost nothing. The king's taxes are heavy, designed to fund wars and court expenses that seem distant and irrelevant to someone brewing beer in the brewery district. Every brewer you know skims at least a little production, hides at least a few barrels. It's practically an industry standard, a necessary adaptation to an unreasonable tax burden. The dragon rumours are another concern, though of a different nature. If dragons truly have returned, and you're still not ready to believe that, then the political situation in Westeros could become unstable in unpredictable ways. Dragons mean Targaryens, and Targaryens mean claims to the throne, and claims to the throne mean wars. Wars disrupt trade, close ports, draft workers into armies, and generally make life harder for common people trying to earn their living. But old Tim was right. Whatever happens in the wider world, people will still need ale. Bread and beer are the foundations of working life, and as long as there are people, there will be demand for both. You might need to adjust your business practices, might need to deal with new authorities or new regulations, but the core work of brewing will continue. You finish your ale and clear away the dinner dishes, washing them in a basin of water you keep by the window. The washing water gets dumped out the window into the street below. Not the most sanitary practice, but standard in this part of the city where proper drainage is limited. You make a mental note to empty the basin earlier tomorrow. The sun-warmed water has developed a slight smell. The candle on your table burns steadily, casting shadows that dance across the sloped ceiling. You have a few more hours before you should sleep. Your body is tired, but your mind is still active, processing the day's events and planning tomorrow's work. You could read, but your small collection of books has been read many times and holds few surprises. Instead, you take out your personal journal, a small leather-bound book where you record thoughts, observations, and notes about brewing, experiments. The journal is private, kept hidden in your chest beneath your spare clothes, written in a simple code that wouldn't fool a determined investigator, but provides some protection against casual snooping. You write about today, the successful batch, the tax collector's visit, the dragon rumours, your conversations with Willem and Jenna. The act of writing helps organise your thoughts, turns vague anxieties into concrete concerns that can be analysed and addressed. You note that you need to be more careful about the hidden barrels, perhaps reduce the number you're hiding, or find a better concealment method. You also note technical observations about today's brewing. The crushed grain texture was perfect. The boil was maintained at ideal temperature. The wort cooled efficiently. These details might seem trivial, but they're the foundation of consistent quality. Brewing is both art and science, requiring creative intuition and careful attention to measurable variables. From the street below comes the sound of singing. Someone leaving an alehouse in high spirits, carrying a tune that's more enthusiastic than melodic. The voice is male, deep and slightly slurred, belting out lyrics about a sailor and a merchant's daughter. You smile despite yourself. It's a common tavern song, bawdy and cheerful, the kind that gets sung when men have had enough ale to forget their dignity, but not so much that they can't walk. The singing fades as the man moves down the street, and the night sounds of King's Landing settle back into their usual pattern. Distant voices, the occasional bark of a dog, the creak of shutters closing as other residents prepare for sleep. The city is never truly quiet, even in the deepest night, but it does slow down, shift into a lower gear. You close your journal and return it to its hiding place, then prepare for bed. The ritual is simple and automatic. Remove your outer clothes, wash face and hands in the remaining clean water, empty the chamber pot out the window. Another practice that would appall people in wealthier districts but is standard here. The bed is narrow and the mattress is lumpy, but you've slept here for 5 years and know exactly how to position yourself for maximum comfort. Before blowing out the candle, you say a brief prayer, not to any particular god, but to the general forces that govern brewing and protect working people. May tomorrow's batch ferment well. May the fires burn steadily. May the tax collectors find no cause for complaint. And may whatever changes are coming pass over this brewery gently. You blow out the candle, and darkness fills the room, except for the faint glow of moonlight through the window. The bed receives you with familiar comfort, and you can feel your muscles beginning to relax after the long day's work. Sleep will come soon, and with it the restoration that will allow you to do it all again tomorrow. From the brewery below, you can hear the faint sounds of old Tim Beginning his night shift, the creak of the cellar door, the soft thud of wood being added to fires, the general quiet activity of brewing continuing even as the city sleeps. It's comforting to know that someone is tending the fires, watching the fermentations, maintaining the endless cycle that produces the ale that King's Landing drinks. Your last conscious thought before sleep claims you is about tomorrow's batch. You'll use that pale malt you measured out. Add just a bit less hops than usual to correct for the overhopping in today's personal barrel. Maybe experiment with slightly higher fermentation temperature to see how it affects the flavour profile. But that's tomorrow's concern. Tonight is for rest, for letting the day's labour fade into sleep, for trusting that the brewery will continue without your constant supervision. Morning comes with the sound of cart wheels on cobblestones and the distant call of roosters from someone's illegal henhouse several streets away. The light through your window is grey and pale, suggesting early dawn, and you lie still for a moment, letting consciousness return gradually rather than all at once. Your body protests slightly as you sit up, muscles stiff from yesterday's work, a general tiredness that suggests you could use another hour of sleep. But the day waits for no brewer, and you have work to do. You stand, stretch, and begin the morning routine that's as automatic as breathing. Cold water from the basin washes the sleep from your face. You dress in the same clothes as yesterday. They'll do for another day before needing washing. The brewing apron will cover most of them anyway, and in this work, spotless clothing is both impossible and pointless. You run fingers through your hair, making yourself minimally presentable, then head downstairs to the brewery. Old Tim is still on duty, though his shift is nearly over. He looks tired but satisfied, the expression of someone who's had a quiet night. Morning, John. All's well. The fermentations are progressing nicely, and I started the fires an hour ago so they'd be ready when you arrived. Good man. Anything I should know about? One of the newer barrels is fermenting a bit more vigorously than expected. I checked it twice during the night to make sure it wasn't going to overflow. Just keep an eye on it. Otherwise, everything's normal. You take the brewing log from him, scanning his neat entries about temperature checks, fire management, and general observations. Everything looks exactly as it should. Get some rest, Tim. I'll see you tonight. After Tim leaves, you stand alone in the quiet brewery, feeling the weight of another day's responsibility settling onto your shoulders. But it's a good weight, a satisfying weight, the burden of meaningful work that needs doing. The fires are burning well, their warmth already spreading through the brewing floor. The copper kettles gleam in the morning light, ready for another day of use. The measured grain from yesterday sits in its covered bin, waiting to be processed. Everything is prepared. Everything is ready. You begin the day's work by checking all the fermentation barrels, starting with the one Tim mentioned. It is indeed fermenting vigorously. You can hear the fizzing sound clearly when you put your ear to the wood, and foam has accumulated around the bung. This is normal for very active fermentation, but it bears watching to ensure it doesn't overflow and make a mess. The other barrels are progressing at their expected rates, each one doing its slow work of transforming sweet wort into alcoholic beer. You make notes in the fermentation log, recording temperatures and activity levels, building the careful record that lets you track each batch from brewing to serving. Upstairs, there's a knock at the street door, unusual at this early hour. You climb the steps from the cellar and open the door to find your grain supplier, Gareth, standing with his cart fully loaded. Morning, John. Got a delivery for you. 200 pounds of pale malt and 50 pounds of crystal, like you ordered last week. The delivery is expected, though you'd forgotten it was scheduled for today. Good, come in. Let's get it unloaded. Together you carry the heavy sacks from the cart to the grain room, stacking them properly against the wall, where they'll stay dry and protected from pests. Each sack weighs about 50 pounds, and by the time you've moved all 5, your arms and back are warm with exertion. How's business? Gareth asks while you count out silver coins to pay him. Steady, can't complain. You don't mention the tax collectors or the hidden barrels. Even with people you trust, some discretion is wise. Good grain market right now, Gareth continues. The harvest was decent, not spectacular, but adequate. Prices should stay stable through winter. He pockets the coins and heads back to his cart. Next delivery in 2 weeks, unless you need something sooner. 2 weeks is fine. Safe travels, Gareth. After the grain delivery, you return to the work you planned for today, brewing another batch of amber ale. You begin by crushing the grain, the familiar rhythm of the hand-cranked mill, creating a meditative state where thoughts can wander while hands work automatically. The morning passes in this rhythm. Crush grain, heat water, create the mash, wait for conversion, drain the wort, prepare for boiling. Each step follows the previous one in a sequence you've performed hundreds of times, a dance where the movements are known and the outcome is predictable if the steps are followed correctly. By mid-morning, you have wort boiling in the copper kettle, the sweet smell of malt filling the brewery, and drifting out into Guild Street. You add the first portion of hops, watching them swirl and sink into the churning liquid. The transformation from grain and water into beer is never less than magical, even after years of brewing. While the boil continues, you take a break in the small courtyard behind the brewery. It's nothing fancy, just a flagstone area perhaps 20 feet square, with a few barrels arranged as seats and a small garden where herbs grow in the poor soil. But it's private and quiet, a space where you can sit and think without the constant demands of work. The October air is cool but pleasant, carrying the mixed smells of the neighbourhood. Smoke from cooking fires, the sharp tang of the nearby tannery, the sea salt from the harbour, and underlying everything, the sweet malty aroma of brewing. These are the smells of working-class King's Landing, familiar and oddly comforting in their consistency. You think about the week ahead. 3 more batches to brew, 2 barrels ready for tapping and sale, the bottled beer to deliver to Tobias, routine maintenance on the copper kettles, a meeting with the coopers about new barrels for the expanding hidden cellar, though you'll need to be careful how you phrase that request. The dragon rumours continue to nag at the edges of your awareness. If they're true, and that's still a big if, then significant changes are coming to Westeros. The Targaryens ruled for 3 centuries before being overthrown, and their rule was intimately connected with dragons. If dragons return, does that mean Targaryen rule returns? And what would that mean for common people like you, trying to make an honest, mostly honest, living? But speculation is pointless. The future will arrive whether you worry about it or not, and worrying won't change whatever is coming. Better to focus on what you can control: the quality of your beer, the management of your business, the maintenance of your equipment and relationships. The break ends and you return to the brewery where the boil is proceeding perfectly. The rest of the day will follow its planned course. Finish this batch, clean the equipment, check fermentations, attend to the 1,000 small tasks that keep a brewery running smoothly. This is your life, day after day, week after week, year after year. It's not glamorous or exciting, but it's real and solid and yours. You're good at this work, take pride in it, earn enough to live with modest comfort. What more could a common person reasonably want? The kettles steam, the fires burn, the yeast works its invisible magic in the cool cellars below. The King's Barrel Brewery continues its operation, contributing its small share to the vast metabolism of King's Landing, helping to keep the city fed and watered and fortified against the challenges of existence. And you're at the centre of it, the brewer who knows every step and stage, who tends the fires and measures the grain and watches the transformation of raw ingredients into finished product. It's honest work, necessary work, work that will continue regardless of dragons or politics or whatever changes the future might bring. Around mid-afternoon, there's another knock at the door, but this one is different, soft and careful, the knock of someone who doesn't want to attract attention. You wipe your hands on your apron and go to answer. already suspecting who you'll find. Marcus stands outside, glancing up and down the street before speaking. He's a tavern keeper from the Fish Hook, one of the larger alehouses down near the waterfront. He's also one of your regular customers for the Hidden Barrels. Ale purchased for cash, no records kept, no taxes paid. John, do you have time for a private word? You nod and let him in, leading him not to the main brewery floor, but to the small courtyard out back where conversations are less likely to be overheard. Marcus is perhaps 45, weathered by years of tavern work, with the cautious eyes of someone who's learned to be careful in a dangerous city. I need 3 barrels, he says quietly, once you're seated on the barrel chairs. Good amber ale, nothing fancy. I can pay your usual rate in silver, no coins from the Crown's mint, all merchant currency that can't be traced. 3 barrels. When do you need them? End of this week. I'm running low, and I've got a group of regular customers who specifically ask for your beer. They don't care that it's technically off the books. In fact, some of them prefer it, like they're getting away with something. You consider. You have 2 barrels in the hidden cellar that are nearly ready, and you could have a 3rd ready by week's end if you start it tomorrow. I can do that. Same price as last time. 3 silver stags per barrel. Done. Marcus produces a small leather purse and counts out 9 silver stags, placing them on the barrel between you. I'll send my cart around Friday evening after dark. Your man Tim will be on shift. He'll know how to handle it. He knows the arrangement. The cart comes to the loading door in the alley. We load quickly. No conversation, no delay. In and out, 5 minutes. Marcus nods, satisfied. You're a careful man, John. That's good in this business. I've worked with brewers who got sloppy, started bragging about their clever tax schemes, ended up in the dungeons under the Red Keep. He stands, preparing to leave. Any truth to these dragon rumours? I don't know. Sailors are saying they've seen something, but sailors see a lot of things that turn out to be imagination and wishful thinking. True enough. Well, whatever happens with dragons, people will still drink ale. Some things never change. He heads back toward the door, then pauses. Watch yourself, John. Tax collectors were at the Fish Hook yesterday, counting cups and comparing them to my reported sales. They're being thorough. After Marcus leaves, you sit for a moment with the 9 silver stags in your hand. This is the profit that makes the risk worthwhile. 9 stags for 3 barrels that cost you perhaps 4 stags total in materials and labour. The markup is significant, enabled by avoiding the king's taxes. But Marcus's warning about the tax collectors being thorough reinforces your own observations. They're not just going through the motions anymore. They're actually investigating, looking for discrepancies, trying to catch people in violations. You need to be even more careful, perhaps even more selective about who you sell untaxed beer to. You pocket the silver and return to the brewery, where the batch you started this morning is ready for cooling. The afternoon follows its usual pattern: cooling the wort, preparing barrels, transferring and pitching yeast, cleaning equipment, checking fermentations. Around the time the sun begins to slant toward evening, you get another visitor, this time someone unexpected. A young man in the clothing of a minor functionary, probably attached to some wealthy merchant's household, enters the brewery with the tentative air of someone unfamiliar with such places. Are you the brewer? He asks, looking around with barely concealed distaste at the steamy, yeasty atmosphere. I am. How can I help you? My master wishes to purchase ale for a private function. He requires 40 gallons of your finest brew, delivered to his residence on the Street of the Sisters next 6th day. Can you provide this? 40 gallons is more than a barrel but less than 2. An unusual quantity that suggests someone who's trying to be precise about quantities for a specific event. I can provide that. My finest amber ale is not amber. My master specifically requests a pale ale, light in colour, delicate in flavour. He intends to serve it to guests from across the narrow sea who prefer less robust beers. Pale ale is more difficult to brew well. It requires extra care in processing, careful temperature control during fermentation, and precise hop balance. It's also more expensive due to the additional effort. I can brew that, but I'll need 4 days minimum for fermentation. Your master's event is 6th day, which gives me just barely enough time if I start tomorrow. The price you calculate quickly. Materials, labour, the risk of brewing a specialty beer that might not turn out perfectly. Delivery. 8 silver stags for 40 gallons delivered. The functionary nods without haggling, a sure sign that his master is wealthy, and 8 stags is inconsequential. Done. I'll return 6th day morning with directions to the residence and a cart for transport. You'll have the beer ready. It will be ready. After he leaves, you make notes about the order in your brewing log. This is the kind of commission that's both opportunity and challenge. Good profit if done well, but failure would damage your reputation with exactly the kind of wealthy customers who pay premium prices. You'll need to focus on this batch. Give it extra attention. Brew it when you're fresh and alert, rather than tired at the end of a long day. The evening is approaching, and with it the end of another working day. Old Tim will arrive soon for his shift, and you'll brief him about tomorrow's special batch and the need for careful monitoring. The day has been long and productive, exactly what a good brewing day should be. You check the fires one last time, making sure they're burning steadily for Tim's shift. You check the fermentation cellar, confirming that all temperatures are stable. You sweep the floor around the kettles, tidy the workspace, and hang your apron on its hook. The work is done for today. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new batches, new transactions, both legitimate and hidden. But that's tomorrow's concern. Tonight is for rest and restoration, for a simple meal and the small pleasures of a room above a brewery in King's Landing's working district. Old Tim arrives precisely on time, as he always does, and you spend 20 minutes briefing him about the day's activities and tomorrow's plans. He takes careful notes, asks clarifying questions, and nods thoughtfully when you mention the special pale ale commission. Pale ale for wealthy merchants. That's tricky brewing. Easy to end up with beer that's too thin or too bitter. You'll want to watch the fermentation temperature carefully. Keep it on the cool side. Tim's knowledge comes from 50 years of brewing, and you always listen when he offers advice. I was thinking to ferment it in the coolest corner of the cellar, maybe even move some barrels to make sure air can circulate around it. Good thinking, and for the hop balance, err on the lighter side. Wealthy customers from across the narrow sea often prefer beer that's less aggressively hopped than our local styles. You discuss the technical details for several minutes, sharing knowledge in the easy way that comes from years of working together. This is one of the pleasures of the craft, talking with someone who understands the subtle variables, who appreciates the small decisions that separate good beer from excellent beer. Oh, and Marcus from the Fishhook will be collecting 3 barrels Friday evening, you mention, lowering your voice even though you're alone in the brewery. The usual arrangement. Tim nods without surprise. I'll have them ready by the loading door, in and out quick, no fuss. Before leaving for your room, you linger for a moment, watching Tim begin his routine checks. There's something comforting about the continuity. Day shift becomes night shift, one brewer hands off to another. The work continues in an unbroken chain that extends back years and will extend forward as long as the brewery operates. Tim, do you ever think about how long this brewery has been here? 300 years making beer day after day, generation after generation? The old brewer pauses in his work, considering the question. I think about it. This building has seen a lot. Wars, regime changes, good times and bad. But people always needed beer, and brewers always made it. There's something reassuring in that continuity. Whatever changes come, whatever happens with politics or dragons or anything else, the basic human needs remain constant. And we serve those needs. We do. It's not glamorous, not important in the grand scheme of history books, but it's real, and it's necessary, and that's enough. Tim returns to his checks, the The conversation apparently complete. You climb to your room thinking about Tim's words. The work is real and necessary. That should be enough. Yet somehow there's a restlessness in you tonight. A sense that the world is on the cusp of changes that will affect even small brewers in working districts. Your room welcomes you with its familiar simplicity. You light the candle, prepare a simple dinner of bread and cheese and ale, and eat while watching the darkening street below. The evening routine unfolds as it always does. People returning home from work, alehouses filling with customers, the gradual shift from day's labour to evening's rest. After eating, you pull out your journal and write about the day, the successful batch, Marcus's visit, and the hidden barrel transaction, the commission for pale ale, your conversation with Tim about continuity and necessity. The writing helps organise thoughts that might otherwise spiral into anxiety. You're in the middle of a sentence when you hear unusual sounds from the street. Raised voices, the rapid footsteps of several people running, then the distinctive whistle that city watch guards use to summon backup. You set down your quill and move to the window, looking out to see what's happening. 2 watch guards are chasing someone down Guild Street, their lanterns bobbing in the darkness. The person they're pursuing is fast, dodging between obstacles, but the guards are fit and determined. Other residents are opening shutters to watch, attracted by the commotion. The chase ends in front of your building. The pursued man trips over some obstacle and falls, and the guards are on him immediately, pinning him to the cobblestones. You can't hear what's being said, but you see one guard show something to gathering onlookers, probably explaining what crime the man committed. One of your neighbours, the cooper from 3 doors down, leans out his window and calls to the guards. "What did he do?" "Pickpocket," one guard calls back. "Caught him red-handed taking a purse in the market." The crowd murmurs in disapproval. Pickpockets are despised in working neighbourhoods, where people have little enough to start with. The guards haul the thief to his feet and march him away, probably toward the nearest watch station, where he'll spend at least one uncomfortable night in cells. The excitement over, residents return to their evening routines. You close your shutters against the night air and return to your journal, but the incident has disrupted your train of thought. You finish the entry quickly and put the journal away. The candle burns down as you sit at your table, thinking about nothing in particular and everything in general. The day's work is complete. Tomorrow's challenges are planned for. The evening is peaceful. This is your life, simple, ordinary, filled with small satisfactions and modest concerns. Eventually, you prepare for bed, following the same routine as every night. The room is cool but not cold, the bed is familiar and comfortable, and sleep comes easily after the long day's work. Your last thoughts are about tomorrow's pale ale batch. You'll need to be especially careful with temperature control and timing to produce the delicate, light beer that wealthy merchants expect. But that's tomorrow. Tonight is for rest. The next morning begins earlier than usual. You want to start the pale ale batch while you're fresh and alert, when your judgment is sharp and your attention is fully focused. The morning light is grey and soft when you descend to the brewery, finding Tim already preparing to hand over the shift. "Morning, John. Ready for your challenge batch?" "As ready as I'll ever be." "How was the night?" "Quiet. All fermentations progressing normally, fires steady, no problems." Tim shows you his careful notes, demonstrating the stable conditions that have held overnight. After Tim leaves, you stand in the quiet brewery, mentally rehearsing the day's brewing schedule. Pale ale requires precision that amber ale forgives. Every variable must be controlled carefully to produce the delicate character that defines the style. You begin by selecting the grain. For pale ale, you'll use only the lightest malts, nothing roasted or dark. You measure 40 pounds of pale malt, checking each scoop to ensure no darker kernels have mixed in. The grain has a light, almost sweet smell, and when you crush a few kernels, they taste biscuity and clean. The grain crushing goes slower than usual. You adjust the mill gap to be slightly wider, crushing the grain less aggressively to avoid extracting harsh tannins that would make the beer bitter and astringent. The resulting grist is coarser than what you'd use for amber ale, but that's intentional. Water temperature for mashing is critical. You want it slightly cooler than usual to favour fermentable sugars over unfermentable dextrins. This will result in a drier, lighter beer without the body that characterises amber ales. You test the water repeatedly, dipping your finger and judging the heat, aiming for that precise temperature where it's comfortably warm but not hot. The mashing proceeds with constant attention. You stir frequently to ensure even temperature distribution. Check the grain bed regularly to confirm proper consistency and adjust the fire carefully to maintain stable conditions. The sweet smell of mashing malt fills the brewery, but it's lighter, more delicate than usual, exactly what you want. After the mash conversion completes, you lauter carefully, recycling the first runoff until it runs perfectly clear. The wort that collects in the kettle is pale golden, almost straw-coloured, beautiful in its clarity and lightness. The boil requires careful attention to hop additions. You're using a delicate hop variety from the Reach, known for floral aromatics rather than aggressive bitterness. You add the first portion at the beginning of the boil, but in smaller quantity than you'd use for amber ale. The key is balance, enough bitterness to refresh, not so much that it overwhelms the delicate malt character. While the boil proceeds, you prepare special arrangements in the fermentation cellar. You move several barrels to create space in the coolest corner, where a small draft from an outside vent keeps temperatures lower than in the main cellar. This is where the pale ale will ferment, in conditions that encourage slow, clean fermentation. The boil completes, and you begin the cooling process. This is another critical phase. The wort must cool quickly to minimise oxidation that would darken the beer and create stale flavours. You enlist the help of Willem from across the street, who comes over during his break to help carry buckets of cold well water that you pour around the outside of the kettle to speed cooling. Pale ale? Willem asks, seeing the light colour of the wort. Special commission. Wealthy merchant wants it for guests from across the sea. Tricky brewing. I've had good batches and failed batches of pale ale, and sometimes I can't tell what made the difference. Willem peers into the kettle, watching the steam rise. This looks good though. Nice light colour, clean aroma. After Willem returns to his brewery, you continue the cooling process alone, stirring regularly to bring hot wort from the bottom to the top. The process takes longer than usual because you're being extra careful. Any contamination at this stage would ruin the batch. Finally, the wort reaches pitching temperature. You transfer it carefully to a clean barrel, trying to minimise splashing that would introduce unwanted oxygen. The barrel you've chosen is one of your newest, barely used, with no residual flavours from previous batches that might affect the delicate pale ale. The yeast you select is a special culture, one you've been maintaining specifically for light beers. It ferments cleanly, producing minimal fruity flavours, allowing the malt and hop character to shine through. You pitch the yeast carefully, stirring it gently into the cool wort, watching the milky suspension disperse throughout the barrel. The barrel goes into the cool corner of the cellar, and you note its exact location in the fermentation log. This batch will require daily monitoring, temperature checks twice a day, careful observation of fermentation vigour, immediate intervention if anything seems off. The rest of the day passes in routine work, cleaning the kettles, checking other fermentations, routine maintenance, but your mind keeps returning to the pale ale, worrying about all the variables that might affect the outcome. This is the curse of brewing special batches. There's so much more to lose if something goes wrong. By evening, when old Tim arrives for his shift, you've checked the pale ale 3 times, each time confirming that fermentation is beginning normally. The yeast is working, producing the gentle fizzing sound that indicates healthy activity. So far, everything is proceeding perfectly. Stop worrying, Tim advises when you mention checking the pale ale again. You've done everything right. And now it's up to the yeast. Trust the process. I'll check it during my shift and note any changes. You know he's right, but that doesn't make it easier to stop worrying. Special commissions like this are opportunities to expand your customer base into wealthier markets, but they're also risks that could damage your reputation if they fail. That evening, you find it hard to settle. You eat dinner mechanically, barely tasting the food. You try to read but can't focus on the words. Eventually, you just sit by the window, watching the street and thinking about yeast and fermentation and all the invisible processes that transform wort into beer. The dragon rumours surface in your thoughts again, not because they're directly relevant to pale ale, but because they represent uncertainty, the same kind of uncomfortable not knowing that characterises waiting for fermentation outcomes. You can't control either situation. You can only prepare as best you can and trust that things will work out. But unlike dragons, which may or may not exist, you at least know that your brewing technique is sound. You've made pale ale before, you understand the process, you've taken every reasonable precaution. The beer should turn out well. Should. The uncertainty is the hard part. The next 3 days pass in a kind of anxious rhythm. Routine brewing work punctuated by regular checks on the fermenting pale ale. Each time you descend into the cellar, you approach the barrel with a mixture of hope and dread, wondering if this will be the check where you discover something has gone wrong. But each check brings good news. The fermentation is proceeding normally, the temperature remains stable in the cool corner, and the smell when you carefully loosen the bung to sniff is clean and promising. No off odours that would indicate contamination or stressed yeast. On the second day, you brew another batch of amber ale to keep your regular production going. This is the bread and butter work that pays the bills. Less stressful than the special pale ale, but no less important. The routine of familiar brewing is actually soothing, a reminder that you know what you're doing, that most batches turn out well because you're skilled at your craft. Willem stops by again during his break, ostensibly to return the tool you lent him last week, but really to check on your pale ale progress. How's it going? So far so good. Fermentation is steady, temperature is perfect, no signs of problems? That's good. I've been thinking about your technique. Mashing cooler, less aggressive hops. Might try that approach myself next time I brew a light beer. You share more technical details, and the conversation becomes a mutual exchange of brewing knowledge. These interactions are one of the benefits of working in a community of skilled craftspeople. Everyone learns from each other, raising the general level of quality throughout the district. On the third day, Marcus arrives to arrange the pickup of his 3 barrels of untaxed beer. You meet him in the small courtyard, away from the main street where conversations might be overheard. Friday evening, just after sunset, you confirm. My nightman Tim will have the barrels ready at the loading door. Your cart should arrive, load quickly, and leave. The whole transaction should take less than 10 minutes. Understood? I'll have 2 strong men with the cart. They'll load efficiently. Marcus glances around, ensuring you're still alone. Any more visits from tax collectors? Not since their first inspection, but I'm being extra careful, documenting everything for legitimate batches, keeping the hidden production minimal. Wise, I've heard they've arrested 3 brewers this month for tax evasion. They're making examples, trying to scare everyone into full compliance. Marcus shakes his head. The king wants more revenue for whatever he's planning, and we small business owners are the easiest targets. After Marcus leaves, you think about his warning. 3 brewers arrested. That's unprecedented in your experience. The risk of the hidden barrels is becoming more significant, which means you need to be even more careful or possibly reconsider the entire practice. But the profit from those barrels is substantial. Without it, your income drops to barely sustainable levels. The decision is difficult. Accept the risk for necessary income or play it safe and struggle financially. You don't resolve the dilemma, just file it away as something you'll need to decide soon. For now, you have the pale ale commission to complete and Marcus's delivery to manage. On foreday, you taste the pale ale for the first time, drawing off a small sample into a wooden cup. The beer has fermented for 3 full days now, and while it's not completely finished, it should give you an indication of how it's developing. The sample is pale golden, almost champagne-coloured in the cup. You smell it first, clean and fresh, with delicate floral notes from the hops and a slight fruity character from the yeast. So far, excellent. The taste is even better. The beer is light-bodied but not thin, with good carbonation and a crisp finish. The hop bitterness is present but restrained, balancing rather than dominating. There's a subtle complexity, hints of biscuit from the malt, touches of citrus from the hops, an overall impression of quality and refinement. You smile, feeling the tension of the past 3 days finally releasing. The pale ale is turning out well, not just acceptably, but genuinely good. The wealthy merchant's guests will have no cause for complaint. You let the fermentation continue through foreday and into Friday morning, giving the yeast time to complete its work and clean up any fermentation byproducts. By Friday afternoon, when you check it again, the fermentation is essentially complete. The beer is ready. You carefully rack the pale ale from its fermentation barrel into a clean serving barrel, leaving behind the sediment layer at the bottom. This transfer clarifies the beer further and ensures that what you deliver is free from yeast and protein sediment that would cloud the appearance. The final product is beautiful, 40 gallons of pale golden ale, crystal clear, with a delicate aroma and refined flavour. You feel justifiable pride in the work. This is the kind of brewing that separates competent craftspeople from truly skilled artisans. That evening, old Tim helps you prepare for Marcus's pickup. The 3 barrels are rolled to the loading door and positioned for quick loading. You've chosen 3 of your better amber ale barrels, all properly aged and ready for consumption. Marcus's cart arrives exactly when promised, just after sunset when the street is dark and relatively empty. 2 strong men make quick work of loading the barrels, and Marcus himself hands you a leather purse containing your payment. The entire transaction takes perhaps 7 minutes, efficient and discreet. "Good doing business with you," Marcus says quietly, before climbing onto the cart. "I'll be back in a few weeks for more." You watch the cart disappear down the dark street, then return inside with the purse of silver. The coins go into your hidden stash, not in the brewery where tax collectors might find them, but in a different location known only to you. This is the shadow economy that makes survival possible for small brewers operating under heavy taxation. The day ends with everything accomplished, the pale ale ready for delivery tomorrow, the hidden barrel transaction completed without incident, routine production continuing normally. You should feel satisfied, and you do, but there's an undercurrent of tension that won't quite go away. The risk of arrest for tax evasion, the persistent dragon rumours, the general sense that the city is on edge about something, all of it creates an atmosphere of uncertainty that makes even successful days feel somehow precarious. But you push these thoughts aside as you prepare for bed. Tomorrow will bring the pale ale delivery and hopefully a satisfied, wealthy customer who might become a source of future commissions. That's something to look forward to, a positive possibility in an uncertain world. 6th day morning arrives with clear skies and cool autumn air, perfect weather for transporting beer. The merchant's functionary arrives at the brewery shortly after dawn, earlier than expected, with a cart and 2 servants to handle the loading. "Is the beer ready?" he asks, all business and efficiency. "It is. 40 gallons of pale ale exactly as requested." You lead him to the cellar, where the serving barrel waits. "Would you like to taste it first to confirm quality?" "That won't be necessary. My master trusts your reputation." But he peers at the beer anyway, checking its appearance. The pale golden colour and crystal clarity seem to satisfy him. "Yes, this looks exactly right. Let's load it." Getting the barrel up from the cellar and onto the cart requires careful work. It weighs perhaps 300 pounds full, and damage from dropping or rough handling would be both costly and embarrassing. You and the two servants maneuver it carefully up the narrow cellar stairs, across the brewery floor, and onto the cart, where they secure it with ropes and padding. The functionary counts out 8 silver stags, then adds a 9th. My master appreciates quality work and prompt service. He may have future requirements for your brewing. I would be pleased to serve your master again. Please convey my thanks for his business. The cart rolls away, carrying your pale ale toward the wealthy district, where people live in ways you can barely imagine. You watch it go with mixed feelings: satisfaction at completing a challenging commission successfully, and a slight envy of people who can afford to spend 8 stags on beer for a single party. But you shake off the envy. Your life is good in its own way. Honest work, sufficient income, a respected position in the community of craftspeople. Wanting more than that is a path to dissatisfaction and poor decisions. The rest of the morning proceeds normally. Routine brewing, fermentation checks, equipment maintenance. Around midday, you take a break to eat bread and cheese in the courtyard, enjoying the autumn sunshine and the simple pleasure of rest after morning labour. That's when you hear the commotion from the street. Multiple voices shouting, the sound of running feet, and underneath it all, a strange high-pitched cry unlike anything you've heard before. You set down your food and move quickly to the street door, pulling it open to see what's happening. The street is filled with people, all looking up at the sky with expressions of wonder and fear. You follow their gaze and freeze, unable to process what you're seeing. High above King's Landing, perhaps 1,000 feet up, something is flying. Something large with wings that catch the sunlight. Something that definitely isn't a bird. A dragon. It's real. The rumours were true. Dragons have returned to Westeros. The creature, and from this distance, you can confirm it's definitely a dragon, not some natural animal, circles above the city in wide, lazy spirals. Even at this distance, you can see the length of its serpentine neck, the powerful wings, the long tail trailing behind. It's beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. A thing from legend made suddenly, impossibly real. The dragon's cry comes again, that high-pitched sound that combines elements of a hawk's scream with something deeper and more resonant. The sound carries across the entire city, and you imagine that everyone in King's Landing is stopping to look up, to witness this impossible sight. People in the streets are reacting in different ways. Some are pointing and exclaiming in wonder. Others look frightened, backing away as if the dragon might suddenly dive down and attack. A few are on their knees, apparently praying. The city watch guards look as confused as everyone else, unsure whether this is a threat requiring action or simply a marvel to witness. You stand in your doorway, watching the dragon's circle, feeling your understanding of the world shift fundamentally. Magic isn't dead. The Age of Wonders isn't over. Everything you thought you knew about how the world works has just been proven incomplete. The dragon makes several more circles, then banks sharply and flies off toward the east, toward Dragonstone. Within minutes, it's out of sight. Though people continue to stare at the sky as if hoping for another glimpse, the street erupts in conversation, everyone talking at once, sharing what they saw, speculating about what it means. You hear fragments of dozens of conversations. Did you see the size of it? Must be a Targaryen behind this. The king will have to respond. What if there are more? Dragons are back. The old magic returns. You return inside the brewery, your mind racing with implications. If dragons are real, if they've somehow returned after more than a century of extinction, then the political situation in Westeros is about to change dramatically. The Targaryens were overthrown when their dragons died. With dragons back, their claims to power become vastly more credible. But what does that mean for common people? For brewers trying to make a living in King's Landing? Will there be war? Will the current regime try to suppress this threat? Or will they negotiate? Will the city become a battleground? You don't have answers to any of these questions, and speculation feels pointless. All you can do is continue your work and deal with changes as they come. But you can't deny the knot of anxiety in your stomach, the sense that the world you knew is ending and something new and uncertain is beginning. The dragon wasn't just a creature, it was a symbol that the old order is breaking down, that the rules everyone thought were fixed might be more flexible than anyone imagined. Old Tim arrives for his shift early, looking shaken. You saw it. Everyone saw it. Hard to miss a dragon flying over the city. What do we do? You think about that for a moment. What we always do. Brew beer, manage the brewery, keep working. Whatever changes are coming, they'll take time to unfold. For now, people still need ale, and we still need to make a living. Tim nods slowly. Practical. I suppose that's the right approach. Though I admit, after 70 years of believing dragons were extinct fairy tales, seeing one in the flesh is disconcerting. Disconcerting. That's one word for it. You manage a slight smile. Well, at least now we know the rumours were true. No more speculation needed. You briefed him on the day's activities and the night's required tasks, but both of you are distracted. Your mind's on that image of a dragon, circling impossibly high above the city. The briefing is shorter than usual, and you head to your room earlier than normal, wanting time alone to process what you've witnessed. Chapter 15. The New World. That evening, you sit by your window long after dark, watching the street below and thinking about dragons and change and uncertainty. The street is busier than usual. Despite the late hour, people are gathering in small groups, still discussing what they saw, still trying to understand what it means. The alehouses are packed, every table full, voices loud with excitement and anxiety. You can hear singing from the broken barrel 2 doors down, someone leading a group through an old Targaryen ballad that probably hasn't been sung publicly in this city for decades. You open your journal and try to write about the day, but the words don't come easily. How do you describe seeing something that shouldn't exist, that violates everything you thought you knew about the world? How do you process the implications without falling into speculation and worry? Finally, you write simply. Today, I saw a dragon. Real. Flying over King's Landing. The rumours were true. Everything changes now, though how and in what ways no one knows. Tomorrow I will brew beer, as I did yesterday, as I will do the day after. Some things must continue, regardless of dragons. You close the journal and prepare for bed, though you suspect sleep will be difficult. Your mind won't stop turning over the images from today, won't stop trying to predict futures that are fundamentally unpredictable. Eventually, exhaustion wins over anxiety, and you drift into troubled sleep populated by dreams of dragons and burning cities and changes you can't control or understand. When you wake the next morning, the world is still there, still functioning, still requiring the same daily work. The dragon didn't destroy everything, didn't immediately transform every aspect of life. The sun still rises, the brewery still needs tending, and ale still needs brewing. You descend to the brewery and begin your morning routine, checking fires, examining fermentations, preparing for the day's batch. The work is familiar and grounding, a reminder that whatever grand changes might be happening in the realm of politics and power, the fundamentals of existence remain constant. Water must still be heated, grain must still be crushed, wort must still be boiled and cooled and fermented. Beer must still be created barrel by barrel, batch by batch, through the application of skill and knowledge and careful attention. You lose yourself in the work, letting the routine tasks carry you through the morning. The steady rhythm of brewing becomes almost meditative. Stir the mash, check the temperature, add the hops, watch the boil. These are the movements you've made thousands of times, and they haven't changed despite dragons returning to the world. Old Tim appears, looking tired but composed. The city is still standing. People are still drinking beer. Life continues. It does, you agree, though I imagine things will get more interesting before they settle down again. Probably, but we'll manage. We always have. Tim begins his end-of-shift routine, checking off his final tasks with the same precision he brings to everything. After Tim leaves, you continue working through the morning, and the steady labour slowly pushes the anxiety to the background. You can't control what happens with dragons or Targaryens or wars between nobles, but you can control the quality of your brewing, the management of your business, the small corner of the world that's under your direct influence. And perhaps that's enough. Perhaps doing your work well, maintaining quality and integrity in your craft, contributing your small share to the city's needs. Perhaps that's the proper response to uncertainty and change. Not panic or inaction, but simply continuing to do what needs doing, with care and skill and honest effort. The kettles steam, the fires burn, the yeast works its invisible transformation in the cool cellars below. The King's Barrel Brewery continues its operation, contributing its measure to King's Landing's vast metabolism, regardless of dragons or politics or the grand movements of history. You are a brewer. You make beer. That's who you are and what you do, and no dragon can change that fundamental truth. The work continues. The day unfolds. The ale ferments in its barrels, slowly transforming from sweet wort into something sustaining and fortifying, something that brings pleasure and refreshment to the people who drink it. And that work is real. That work is necessary. That work is yours. Let the nobles worry about dragons and thrones and power. Let the merchants worry about trade routes and profit margins. Let the soldiers worry about wars and conflicts. You have beer to brew, and that's enough. That's honest, that's true. The afternoon sun slants through the high windows, painting the copper kettles in golden light. The smell of malt and hops fills the air, familiar and comforting. The steady bubble of boiling wort provides a soothing background sound. You find yourself relaxing into the work, the tension from yesterday's revelation slowly draining away. Yes, dragons are real. Yes, changes are coming. But for now, this moment, this task, this batch of beer, these things are real and immediate and within your control. You stir the boiling wort with long, slow movements, watching the liquid swirl and settle. The hop flowers bob on the surface, releasing their bitterness into the sweet liquid. The transformation continues, patient and inexorable, following laws older than politics or human concerns. Time passes. The boil completes. The cooling begins. The day's work moves through its familiar stages, each one following naturally from the previous. By evening, when you finish the day's major tasks, you realize you feel almost peaceful? Not happy exactly, not given the uncertainty that lies ahead, but grounded, centered, connected to something real and enduring. You climb to your room as sunset paints King's Landing in orange and purple light. The city stretches out below your window, vast and complex and somehow still functioning despite everything. You eat a simple dinner, bread, cheese or apple, your own ale, and watch night fall over the brewery district. The ale houses fill as they do every evening. People laugh and talk and drink. Life continues, as it always has, as it always will. Perhaps that's the true lesson. Not that changes aren't real or significant, but that life is bigger than any single change, more resilient than any single disruption. People adapt, communities endure, work continues. You prepare for bed with the same routine as always, finding comfort in the familiar movements. The bed receives you with its usual comfort, and sleep comes more easily than last night, your mind quieter, your anxiety less sharp. As you drift towards sleep, your last thoughts are of tomorrow's brewing. You'll start another batch of amber ale, check the fermentations, perhaps begin a new specialty batch if you get a commission. The work continues, regardless of dragons, and that's exactly as it should be. Sleep well, brewer. Let the concerns of kings and dragons fade into the background, unimportant in this moment of rest and recovery. Let the steady rhythm of your work carry you forward through uncertain times, providing structure and purpose and meaning. Let the simple satisfaction of honest labour done well be enough to sustain you, to give you peace, to help you rest. The fires will burn tomorrow. The grain will need crushing. The wort will need boiling. The beer will need tending. And you will do those things as you've done them yesterday and the day before and the day before that. Because that's what brewers do. That's what you do. The work continues, the life continues, the world continues. And that's enough. Sleep now and rest deeply. Tomorrow will bring its challenges and its satisfactions, its worries and its small victories. But tonight is for rest, for letting go of concerns you can't control, for trusting that morning will bring renewed energy and fresh perspective. The brewery is in Tim's capable hands. The fermentations proceed without your supervision. The city sleeps around you, or mostly sleeps, or at least quiets for the night. And you can rest knowing that you've done your work well, that you've contributed your measure to the city's needs, that you've maintained quality and integrity in your small corner of the world. That's enough. That's always enough. Sleep well, brewer of King's Landing. Let the small satisfactions of honest work carry you into peaceful dreams of copper kettles and autumn grain and the steady transformation of simple ingredients into something nourishing and good. The work will be there tomorrow. For now, rest. Just rest. Let go. Sleep. Good night.